Right. Well, thanks for coming to worship with this morning. It is great to see everybody here. And again, I want to welcome our first-time visitors or second-time visitors or guests, people that haven't been here in a while. It's great to see you. I do want to say up front, whenever Tiffany and I are traveling, we love to visit other churches just to, check out, see what they're doing, and hear other pastors preach. And anytime I'm at a church and their pastor preaches on tithing or giving or on money, I always think is this guy preach on this every week? Is this one of those churches they're always asking for that? It's just one of those little things. So I want you to know we are in the middle of our series on Proverbs. And so I don't preach on money and giving every week. But this week you're in for a treat because this is the lucky week. So we've been going through the book of Proverbs, and we've been looking at some of the major themes that are in Proverbs. Themes like the rich versus the poor, the foolish versus the wise, the diligent hard worker versus the sluggard or the lazy. And today we're going to look at some of the Proverbs that talk about money. Now, just as there are several major themes that you can see throughout the book of Proverbs, there are several major themes that talk about money. One is the rich versus the poor. Another is the wealthy versus poverty. Actually, that sounds like the same thing, don't they? A little different, though, you'll see. Another is the generous versus the stingy and the greedy. Another is trusting God versus trusting in our money. Another is how people view the poor versus how God views the poor. And then finally, the theme of borrowing and lending. So we all like the idea of being rich, right? No one wants to be poor. Everyone wants to be rich. If you had your choice, we could buy what you want. As we talked about the kids, you could go on nice vacations, have a Lamborghini or whatever car that you want, that bigger house, all the things that you want, right? And of course, you bless others a little bit. But, right, no one wants to be poor. So even though money can't buy happiness, you can sure rent it for a little while, can't you, with some money? So a rich person looks at a mountain and thinks, how much to buy that view? While a poor person looks at the mountain and thinks, I hope my Wi-Fi reaches all the way up there. All right. Speaking of views, how do we or some people view the poor? Not too highly often, right? Not too highly. But I want to listen to this. This is Proverbs 19:4. Wealth attracts many friends, but even the closest friend of the poor person deserts them. Proverbs 19:7. The poor are shunned by all their relatives. How much more do their friends avoid them? Though the poor pursue them with pleading, they are nowhere to be found. Now, to be fair, maybe the poor person's friends and family end up avoiding them because they're always asking for money. And every time they see that relative coming, they're like, I know he's going to ask me for money again, right? Or she, I mean to be sexist. So maybe, to be fair, that's why, right? But isn't it true that we are tempted to judge poor people? Isn't it tempted that we look at them, you see the person on the street corner holding the sign saying, we'll work for money or we'll work for food or something, right? We are tempted to start to judge that person, not even knowing their circumstances at all, right? We don't know how they came to be there. We don't know what their life story is, but we're still tempted to judge them. And oftentimes, what's the first thing we think? Get a job, right? That's easy for us. But if you've ever worked with homeless people, whatever their circumstances, however they got there, you know that it's not that simple. It's very hard, especially for someone who is homeless and has been homeless, to actually get a job. First of all, many of them have been robbed at some point in time, had their things taken, and you have to have an ID and a driver's license to get a job. And let's say you have a driver's license, if you don't have your social security card or some second form, right, you have to have a place to get that mailed to you. You go and you fill out the forms, you have to have a mailing address. Many of them don't have a place where they can even have documents mailed. A lot of them only have one set of clothes. And if you go in for an interview and you don't smell very good, chances of getting called back are slim. So I'm not making excuses or reasons. What I'm saying is it's a lot more complicated than that. And so we need to be careful in our hearts and in our thoughts as we judge people. Well, let me ask you this. How does God view the poor? How does God view homeless people and poor people when he looks at them? Listen to this. This is Proverbs chapter 22, verse 2. Rich and poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all. God made all of us, and he loves all of us. And God sees every person, not even just the poor people. God sees every people oftentimes differently than we see them, right? And he wants us to see them differently than we do. Ultimately, he would like us to see others the way he sees them. And God would like us to treat others the way that we ourselves, this is a golden rule, that we would want others to treat us if we found ourselves in those circumstances. And more than that, there's actually a warning for us in the Proverbs that if we treat poor people unfairly, if we try to take advantage of them or treat them unfairly, we will be punished. But if we are kind to the poor, we will be blessed. Listen to a couple of these Proverbs. This is 19:17. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will receive them, and God will reward them for what they have done. 17:5. Whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. Here's 14:31. Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. 22:23. Do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court, for the Lord will take up their case and exact life for life. Okay, there's others in there. I'm just going to touch on a couple. By the way, if you haven't read through the Proverbs in a long time, they're fun to read through. There's some real serious stuff, but there's some kind of funny stuff in there as well. So I encourage you guys to go through the Proverbs and read them. And I can't cover every proverb about money, right? There's so many of them. So I'm just kind of grabbing a couple of the highlights to give us an idea of what these themes are. So no one wants to be poor, but believe it or not, there are some disadvantages for being rich. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'll take those disadvantages. I'll trade them for my current situation. But while none of us would like to be poor, there are disadvantages to being rich. Rich people do have worries just like everybody else. For example, the rich worry about their stocks and bonds, and the poor worry about being put in the stocks if they don't pay the landlord their rent. I mean, come on. Just a little smile. That wasn't a guffaw, laugh out loud joke, but there's a little smile there. All right. Here are some disadvantages of wealth. People that really have a lot of wealth and are rich. One is it can bring problems from others and from within us. Proverbs 13:8 says, "A man's riches may ransom his life, but a poor man hears no threats." I'm not rich, and I have never been taken hostage to have my wealth ransom my life, so there's probably some truth in that, right? All right, come on, I just need a little smile once in a while. I'm trying to make this lighthearted. So another disadvantage is that wealth often brings false friends, right? Proverbs 19:4, wealth brings many friends, but a poor man's friends deserts him. 18:20, and everyone is a friend of the man who gives gifts. This reminds me of Jesus' parable that he told about the prodigal son, right? He goes to his father and asks I want to spend my inheritance now. Give me my half of your, what my inheritance would be. And what happens? He has all this money and he goes out and has all these parties and all these friends want to come and be with him. And then as soon as he runs out of money, what happens? He has no friends. Everybody deserts him. This is usually true. It's hard for rich people to actually know who their friends are. I'm not rich and I know who my friends are, right? But rich people, if you're really wealthy, it's hard to know if someone really wants to be your friend because they like you and your friends, or if they just want something from you. In fact, it usually proves to be the people that don't want anything from them that end up being their friends. Now, some of us have experienced this as well. Here's another disadvantage of wealth, is that it's easy to stop trusting in God and even looking to Him and acknowledging Him, and to start trusting in all your money and all your wealth. After all, who needs God, right? You have all this money. Proverbs 18:11 says, "The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it an unscalable wall." 11:28 says, "Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf." And 11:4 says, "Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death." Fourth problem that wealth can bring is problems from within us. Greed can cause us to want to have more. And for wealthy that are in a position to do so, the temptation is there to treat others poorly or to take advantage of the less wealthy who can't defend themselves to get more for yourself. One challenge the rich face is battling the desire within them for more. Now, all of us face this temptation. All of us, or most of us, we always want maybe just a little more than we have, right? It'd be nice to, well, I'm comfortable. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to be at that next step up where I could have more? We all face that temptation for that desire. But, so I'm told, I haven't experienced this, people that are wealthy and that have the opportunity to take advantage of others to gain more, there's even a greater temptation there. It's no wonder that Jesus said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oftentimes, it's because of greed. Proverbs 28:25 says, "The greedy stir up conflict, but those who trust in the Lord will prosper." 29:4 says, "By justice a king gives a country stability, but those who are greedy for bribes tear it down." 15:27 says, "A greedy man brings trouble to his family, but he who hates bribes will live." A sister to greed is stinginess, right? Now, someone can be stingy and not greedy. That's very possible. But very few people who are greedy are not stingy as well. Proverbs 28:22 says, "The stingy are eager to get rich and are unaware that poverty awaits them." And just at a practical, stingy people, they're not really fun to be around, right? Most of us know at least one person who's just really stingy. Doesn't mean they're greedy, but they're kind of stingy, not very generous or at all. They're really not that fun to be around. Listen to this. This is interesting. Proverbs 23:6-8. "Do not eat the food of a begrudging host. Do not crave his delicacies, for he is the kind of person who is always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. You will vomit up the little you have eaten and will have wasted your compliments." That's interesting. Now, let us contrast greed and stinginess with generosity. Why should we even be generous? After all, it's yours. It's your money. Those are your things. And let's be honest, money isn't the only thing we can be stingy with. How about our time? That's more precious to me than my money is. Any day. Proverbs 22:9. "The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor." Here's Proverbs 11:24-26. "One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will also be refreshed. People curse the one who hoards grain, but they pray God's blessing on the one who is willing to sell." So generosity is a characteristic of a righteous, godly person. And this is great. This is out of Proverbs 31. We know it as the wife of noble character, right? It's the chapter on that. It says, "She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy." And if you're trying to decide yourself whether you should be a little more stingy or whether you should be a little more generous, consider this. Not only will God bless you if you are generous, but other people will like you and respect you more. Proverbs 11:16 says, a kind-hearted woman gains respect, but ruthless men gain only wealth. 29:7 says, the righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern. Now, this is about being generous with others. What about being generous with God? What does Proverbs say about giving your tithes, and not only that, your time back to serve God? Proverbs 3:9-11 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. If you really want God to bless you, don't just give God your leftovers. Give him your first fruits. This seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it? If you only have so much and you give some to God, well, then you only have so much left. But Tiffany and I have seen this in our lives, and maybe some of you have too. When you tithe regularly, when you are generous, somehow you end up having more. You just do. I don't know how it works. It doesn't make sense. I think that's the Lord's blessings for people who are faithful and obedient. By the way, they say that money talks. All my money ever said to me was goodbye. That's an old joke, but it's funny, I have to say. And that's one way to become poor, isn't it? To spend money not wisely, to just foolishly spend it on things that you don't really need, waste money on little luxuries. Now, we all like little luxuries once in a while. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like everything else, moderation is key, right? But if all of a sudden every day, well, I deserve a little luxury today, and later today, and tomorrow, and all of a sudden that we become a habit, right? I'm not picking on Starbucks. Yeah, I am. I make my coffee at home. I'm too cheap to go buy a coffee somewhere, especially since I just like black coffee, right? I took my daughter to Starbucks, and she said, oh, Dad, are you going to get anything? I said, oh, no, honey, this is just a treat for you. And she's like, oh, okay, well, I'll get a small drink. $8. $8 for a small mocha something. I don't know what it is. Once in a while, hey, it's a treat. It's fun. No problem. But those little habits, if they're not watched, if they're not kept in check, we can treat ourselves all the way into debt, right? And that's another thing to waste money on. I understand. Sometimes you got to use a credit card. I get it. Some debt is an investment. Jordy said she would pay for college. What an investment in your future, right? You buy a home. Now you have your own place to live in. Eventually, someday, hopefully for us, a long time from now, you sell it and it's gained in value, right? Appreciated in value. But how much money do some of us, or have we in the past, paid on interest for credit card debt? And things we look at and we're like, well, did I really need that? Well, did I really need that? And we're literally wasting money just paying on interest. So there's many Proverbs that talk about going into debt and about being careful not to go into debt. Listen to this, Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. So I want to talk about lending money for just a minute, especially to family and to friends, right? If you can afford it, if it's not a hardship for you, here's my personal rule of thumb, and you do whatever you want. I'm not standing here telling you what to do. I'm just trying to tell you some wisdom from Proverbs and my own life experience. If you are kind of strapped yourself and you're just making it check to check, and you have a family member that needs to borrow money, and you might be hurting if they don't pay it back, it's okay to say no. You don't have to be their bank. You don't have to. And if the bank won't lend them money, it's probably because the bankers don't think they're going to be able to pay it back. So if you can afford to, if you can say, you know what, they're promising to pay it back, I believe them, sure, of course, they have good intentions. If I never see this money again, I'm okay. Tiffany and I are going to make it, it's not going to be a hardship. If you can lend money, and knowing that if you never saw this again, you're going to be okay, yeah, do it. But if it's going to put you in a hard situation, we're going to look at a couple of verses. I'm actually gotten ahead of myself in my sermon. If it puts you in a hard situation or has the potential to, here's what the scriptures say about that. Proverbs 11:15. He who puts up security for another will surely suffer, but whoever refuses to strike hands and pledge is safe. 22:26-27. Do not be a man who strikes hand in pledge or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay when that person defaults and can't do it, your very bed will be snatched from under you. So again, a good rule of thumb is if you can lend it and say, you know what, I'm okay with never getting this back, then that's up to you if you decide you want to do it again. But if you truly are going to need that money, I and the scriptures encourage you at least to think twice about it. Here's another general rule of thumb. You do your own thing. When you lend money to a family member, it has the potential to really put strain on that relationship in several different ways, right? Oh, okay, can I borrow money, Uncle Steve? I promise I'm going to pay you back. Man, you don't even have a job. I don't think you're going to be able to pay me back. I promise I will. So you lend money, right? Or a cousin, a brother-in-law, whoever. You lend money within your family. Now, every time you see that person at family gatherings, at get-togethers, that's on your mind. Oh man, we went out to this great restaurant the other night. What do you mean? That's an expensive restaurant. You owe me $200 still. What are you doing spending that $200 at a restaurant? Right? We start to all of a sudden, in our minds, as we look at them, it affects our relationships. Anyways, you make up your own mind. But once again, especially with family, I would say if family, and which one of us, of course, right? You ask for bread, are you going to give them a stone? No, of course. If our family comes to us, and Tiffany and I have co-signed on apartments and cars for our girls, it wasn't a hardship for us. We knew they could pay the rent, and if they couldn't, we didn't want to see them homeless. We did it. It's fine. But once again, it's going to be a hardship on you financially, or if then every time your daughter says, oh yeah, we went out to eat at this place, and you're like, okay, you still owe me $300. If that's going to affect your relationship, don't do it. Or give it, and then in your mind just say, we're never going to see that money again. I'm never going to ask them, hey, when are you going to pay me back? Just never do it again. If you can make that cut and not hold it over them, yeah, do it. Help them out. If you're going to be looking at them and always, why would you let your relationship within your own family be ruined over money? Just something to think about. They say that a rich man's trash is a poor man's treasure, which explains why you'll see me at my neighbor's yard sale next week. All right, what are some foolish ways, thus wrong ways, right? The Bible, we talked about this already. Sometimes in the Proverbs say, the fool or the foolish sister, talking about an unrighteous person, someone that's not following God's laws. What are some wrong ways to become wealthy or to try to become wealthy? Proverbs 13:11 says, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. That's like the saying, easy come, easy go, right? When you have had to set a budget and stick to it, when you've had to work hard and watch your money, there's something that goes along with it that also then gives you this attitude of, okay, I'm going to make sure I'm saving. I'm going to be more diligent with my finances than if you just got something easily. It's easy just to spend it and let it go. Proverbs 21:5-6, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. A fortune made by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a deadly snare. So, dishonest gain. If you have to lie to get that extra money, I encourage you to pray about it. See what God wants you to do. Does he want you to lie and be dishonest to get gain? How about this one? Proverbs 22:16. One who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. By the way, we've talked before about fear of the Lord is not being afraid of God, although sometimes we should be. Really, it's about a heart attitude, an attitude of pride and recognizing who God is and who we are in relation to him. That's what this is talking about. So if you have to oppress someone else, if you have to take advantage of someone, this says the poor, especially someone who can't help themselves, if you have to do that to get that wealth or that gain, once again, I encourage you to pray about it, because I don't think that's how God or that person would really like you to gain that wealth. 16:8, better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. All right, there's more. You can go to the Proverbs and read them. So let me ask you this. What are some good ways to gain wealth, or wise ways to at least not become poor? Well, number one, we talked about this. Don't be lazy, right? If you can work, work. Tiffany and I at both times, even while we've had kids at home, have had a second job just to make a little extra money, either to save towards something that we wanted or to pay off something that we had. There's no shame in that. Proverbs 10:4 says, lazy hands make a man poor, but diligent hands bring wealth. Then, after you've worked hard for your money, right? Steward it wisely. You have a budget and stick to your budget, right? So in order to stick to a budget, you have to have one. That is a first step. And your budget needs to have you spending less than you're making. I messed that up last week when I was talking about that, right? You have to spend less than you make. If you spend more than you make, you're never going to become wealthy, or at least even be comfortable, right? I'm saying wealthy and rich. For most of us, we will never attain that. So let's just say being comfortable, having what we need, versus not being able to have what we need, right? By the way, if you're just new to making budgets, make sure you leave a little margin in there for those unexpected expenses. A number of years ago, when Tiffany and I got serious and we did Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar, we read that book, and then we got our budget. We were very good with the every dollar budget, which just means every dollar is accounted for, right? And you spend it any way you want, but his point, Dave Ramsey, is that you know where your money's going. That you don't get to the end of the month, it's like, oh, where'd all that go, right? That you know. Well, we had every dollar budgeted. And then that first month, an unexpected expense came up. And we're like, oh, well, this isn't in our budget. We're like, okay, we'll take some money from here. Okay, no problem, we're good. Guess what happened the next month? Another unexpected item came up that we had to spend money on. And what we found month after month and year after year is there are always unexpected, unforeseen expenses that come up. So in your budgeting, set aside some money so that when those unexpected things come up, you don't have to go into debt to cover them if you're able to, right? Okay. After 7 years of diligently following and saving and setting aside, the reward is Tiffany and I had a nice amount of money to put as a down payment on our house. So, right? And so then our loan is less. Now we're paying less interest. So diligence now can really pay you later. All right. Let me just ask you this. Actually, and according to the Proverbs, being generous is another way to bring financial blessings on you. Proverbs 10:22, the blessing of the Lord brings wealth without painful toil for him. Proverbs 28:27, those who give to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to them receive many curses. Some of you have experienced this. I don't know quite how it works and how God does it, but sometimes, right, when you're giving faithfully and regularly, when you have your tithe and you're even able to help out above, somehow there's extra money and extra blessings. And I suspect that when you're diligent in your budget, when you truly are diligent in your finances and you set aside money for that tithe, you're diligent in the other areas of your life, right? You'll spend less money on wasteful things, on luxury things that you may not need, and then you'll have more money to do stuff with. I think mostly that's how it works, right? As opposed to just foolishly, oh yeah, here's this, all that, oh, I have no money. But I also think there is a part that the Lord blesses that. It tells us that in the scriptures, and Tiffany and I have experienced that as well. When we have been able to be faithful in tithing and generous, We have all these blessings. I'm not talking about we open the door and all of a sudden here's this bag of cash, right? Unless you steal it from that money truck at the bank when no one's looking. That's not the blessing. That's how it works, right? Malachi 5, God says, bring your full tithe in and see if your blessings will not be overflowing. That's a Steve George paraphrase of it. All right, so no one wants to be poor. Everyone would like to be rich, except for the problems it can bring. But is there something more valuable than money? Is there anything that's more valuable to you than money? And I see people that have already figured out, yes, there is. One is, for me personally, is relationships. My relationships are so much more important to me. My friendships and my family, they're more important to me than any amount of money ever could be. Here's something that the Proverbs says is more important than money. A good name. Proverbs 22:1. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Here's another one. Wisdom and understanding. And this is a theme throughout, as you read throughout the Proverbs, especially the first couple chapters, that being wise, that having understanding is so much more valuable. Listen to this. This is Proverbs 3:13 through 15. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. For she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire compares with her. Here's this one I like, Proverbs 8:18 through 19. This is wisdom personified speaking. So it's wisdom speaking to you. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. Proverbs 23:24 through 5. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. In other words, if you spend your money foolishly and without thought, your riches will disappear like an eagle flying away. I think for me, in the end, when I think about this topic, and here's my words of wisdom, if you will, for you, just something to consider. For me, I love this prayer in Proverbs chapter 30, verses 7 through 9. Two things I ask of you, O Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. 1, keep falsehood and lies far from me. Seems good. And 2, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God. God, don't make me rich. I don't need that temptation. God, please help me from being poor so I don't end up dishonoring you. Help me be content with what I have. That seems like a good prayer to me. Let's pray. Father, you have been good to us, every person here. We have your blessings in our life, and we thank you and we praise you for that now. God, would you help us to be content, not to always be wanting more and looking after what other people have that we don't. Father, would you also continue to provide for our needs. Help us to trust for you and to look for your hand in our blessings. We ask this, Father, in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.